Alright everyone, now we have to talk about the political impact of the abysmal failure that has been the Beijing-Biden asterisk administration, his stewardship pending somebody being in there that's actually mentally coherent. Hopefully Trump, could be DeSantis, Rand Paul, could be some other Democrat. There are a couple of them that are at least viable, if not necessarily more sane than Joe Biden. Pete Buttigieg comes to mind, Kirsten Gillibrand, anyone? It'd be really funny if it was Amy Klobuchar. Can you imagine having the mom from Coraline as the president of the United States and the first female to hold that position? That'd be funny. Wine drunk and all. A supermajority of Democrats now, in multiple polls, are saying that they want Joe Biden not to run in 2024. A much more dire number, by the way, than didn't want Trump to run again. Of course, he did have issues with that. There was a coalition of Republicans in party that didn't like Trump. But the Never Trump movement never really gained traction. It sort of petered out in the 20s or maybe the 30s, fairly early on in his presidency, prefaced mostly on mean tweets. Then the economy got good for about 3 years, and all of a sudden, most of those people disappeared, leading to January 6th, and then it has a partial resurgence, basically just among the elite Republicans. And the lay Republicans never really climbed back aboard with it. There are Republicans who don't want Trump to run in 2024, but it's not because of insurrection or anything like that. In many cases, I think it's about the age question. If he runs against Joe Biden, he happens to be 4 years younger, and that question disappears, hence the Democrats scrambling to try to throw Biden under the bus. That is clearly what they're doing now. The legacy media has finally turned on him. Right before midterms, right before new inflation data comes out, by the way, that story is going to be a humdinger. I'll be covering that in my live stream later. Inflation expectations are not very good, just to be clear. I don't think there's anyone that expects it to have gone back down. If Biden runs, I think that he loses massively. It won't just be the age question. Again, whether he's running against Trump or DeSantis, Rand Paul, even fucking Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, any of the other usual gang of neocon idiots, I think that he would lose in a landslide, which is why all of these people are clearly lining up and angling for a potential shot. Even Youngkin is thinking of it. Quite clearly. It's a terrible idea. Dude, you just knocked off the Dems in Virginia. You have a long-term stable job. You can't be governor twice in a row in Virginia, so you have to bounce back and forth between governor and lieutenant governor. But you can do that. You'd probably do that for the next 20 years if you wanted to, because the Democrats imploded. Do not mistake, Glenn Youngkin, the fact that the candidate you were running against, who was handily ahead of you, suddenly dumped 7 points because of critical race theory and abortion. Do not think of that as being some sort of national mandate. Just to be clear, you don't even have a state mandate yet. You got to work a little bit harder. Here's the thing. I don't think there's ever been another instance in certainly recent presidential history. And I like these things. I like studying the history of presidencies. The ins and outs, their personality, how they worked with Congress, how they got along with the people, polling and stuff. I've been interested in this for a long time, even before I started really making political content. To my knowledge, there's no other instance where a president in their first term has fallen so low. He's second lowest next to Truman, effectively for actual long-term aggregate approval. He is the lowest in modern polling history for this point in his first term. He's much lower than Trump, way lower than Obama or even like W. W was riding high at this point in his presidency because 9/11, we got to fight him over there so we don't have to fight him over here. Let's invade a country that has nothing to do with what just happened. That's a good time is had by all. Hey, you want cheap opioids, America? Yeah. Fentanyl undercuts it later on, but for a while it was a really good grift. Lots and lots of heroin and shit. And to my knowledge, though, there's never been an instance in which this many people in party didn't want the incumbent to run again. The problem is when you get rid of the incumbent, you lose that incumbent advantage. That's one of the 13 keys to the White House, by the way. Kamala clearly can't fill his shoes. I know Biden's demented and incoherent and doing a terrible job. The economy's all messed up, blah, blah, blah. I understand. Kamala would have the double problem of having not gotten the incumbency, because she was only the VP. Also, she's arguably less able at debating. Biden actually is better at debating even with cognitive decline than she is. Has lower approval, is less personable, has less experience, and is less likable. Kamala would be a terrible idea too. if you look at others within the administration. Buttigieg rises to the top. The problem is, again, he hasn't really distinguished himself. Saying I was a mayor for a term and then transport secretary under this dude you fucking hated so much you wouldn't let him run again, that's not necessarily the greatest qualification. You'll have to throw Biden under the bus. Really what they're looking for is someone outside of the Biden administration. There are a few people there. You could get Klobuchar. I hate her. She'd be a terrible president, but she's not currently in a staff role in the administration. Gillibrand, in my opinion, is probably the most viable. She's sitting in the background right now and not doing too much. You could have a dark horse candidate. I think that might be the most likely shot the Democrats have of any possibility of winning in 24. But in order for that to happen, an elaborate stage theater production has to go on first. They have to lose heavily in the midterms. And they can blame Biden and throw him under the bus, but they also have to do some soul searching. They're going to have to decide, we can't continue to be a hybrid party. The big tent that we've formed is unstable. It's not like the Republican big tent where somehow populists, libertarian-leaning people, and evangelicals are all capable of coexisting because there's Trump and because there's some sort of economic glue holding the party together. That works. The idea of an inter-party schism in the Republican Party is brought up as a meme, but it really doesn't exist. The Democrats have the union Dems and like neoliberal sorts, and they also have an uprising of leftoids. They can't both be appeased. It is simply impossible to craft any policy that these hardline leftoid socialism lovers are going to accept that will also be palatable to the many tens of millions of union and centrist Dems that exist. It's not possible. They can't coexist. The Democrats have to decide, therefore, are we going to swing to the left and will become effectively the party of AOC, or are we going to purge these people and ignore them again like we used to before they became more numerous? We lose some of their grassroots support, but whatever, and we go back to being like a JFK thing. If they successfully do this, by the way, the party could become palatable again. I say this as a non-Republican, non-conservative. The GOP is certainly not my natural home within politics. Lean libertarian. Under normal circumstances of yesteryear, I'd be more likely to vote for a Democrat than for a Republican in many cases. But there are no Democrats that seem to be operating with an ounce of sanity right now. It's become a big problem. Again, an independent voter who is roughly centrist on many issues, certainly not guns, taxes, and gay rights and things. I lean to the right or to the left heavily on certain issues, but in general, and I'm not actually an extremist. It's funny, the people that think that Anne Frank had white privilege think that I'm the Nazi. Very interesting times we live in. We've all gone to hell, I think. The timeline, I think we opened a black hole at CERN, and right now we're actually in hell. We're in purgatory, suffering. I say that half-jokingly. What needs to happen is they need to reform the party. When a supermajority of people are telling you to get the fuck out, even though you've got the incumbency, I think the writing is on the wall, too. These are Democrats being pulled. But by the way, if you look at a broad segment of the population, of course, Biden has legendarily low approval. But that sample includes Republicans, it includes right-leaning independents. That really, it doesn't matter for the purposes of a party primary. Most of those primaries aren't open. The GOP, I think, has more open primaries than the Democrats do. A lot of theirs are still old-style caucuses, which Bernie Sanders, I think, adored. And then the legacy media, after he did well there, of course, suggested it was time to retire that system and move to all closed primaries, for a very good reason. Easier to cheat. By the way, you're allowed to say that about the primaries. You just can't claim that it ever happens in a general election that has a result that the legacy media and big tech happen to like. This is among Democratic voters. This is registered Democrats in most cases. A majority, a supermajority, more than 60% do not want Joe Biden to be the candidate. The only reason that he could be the candidate is because if a packed group of people decide to run against him, nobody can maybe achieve the 35-40% he would still be at because of that incumbency, number one. That's one possibility, so he still wins. Number two, much like with the Trump effect in the GOP, there's no guarantee that if Biden decides to run, that most states will even hold a primary. Because he is the incumbent, they may suspend their primaries and say, look, there is no race to have. He has the right to run again because he's the current sitting president, and we have a long-term 150-plus odd year sentiment behind this, that the incumbent has the opportunity to run, and we put our weight behind him, troubled as though he may be. This is also why Trump is virtually a shoo-in if he decides to run in the GOP primaries. By the way, if Trump and Biden face off again, Biden, I believe, will handily lose. I think it'll be a crushing, a landslide defeat like you haven't seen in modern electoral politics. Maybe the last time Reagan's re-election bid. That'd probably be the closest thing to it. That's about all. Peace out.